So many people have gone to my YouTube videos over the years and are now going to my website, and I'm very flattered about it because they want to learn things and they want to watch my coaching videos. But I thought it might be quite interesting for you to discover what I learnt from. This is a series of podcasts called What I Learnt From. What I learnt from certain conductors, from other teachers, from other wonderful musicians. And all of the things that went together to making me the person, the musician, and the trombonist that I am today. I hope you enjoy these. And in this podcast on what I learned from viola players. And for those of you expecting viola jokes, there might be one or two. Any viola players who've tuned in to this, I apologize already. But this may be the biggest sell for the viola you've heard for a while, because the most part of this is very serious. Before we kick off, though, I would like to bookend this podcast with a couple of viola stories. They're not jokes, they're stories, they're true, they actually happened. And so apparently for the viola players listening to this, you don't know that in Schubert's Ninth Symphony, there's a massive feature for the trombones. The trombones are really important. Schubert wrote incredibly well for the trombones. Really great writing, great to play, fantastic, lots to do. And we were one time in the London Symphony sitting behind the back desk of violas. And we didn't hold back. It was quite strong. And at the end of the concert, the conductor, in sign of great appreciation, stood the trombones up, stood us up. We stood up, at which point, one of the back desk viola players turned around and said, "I didn't know there were trombones in this." That's not a joke, that's a story. That happened. And now to the serious part of the podcast, although more coming in the funny story line coming up later. When I went to the Vienna Philharmonic in 2000, I didn't think that the workload could possibly be any harder than I had experienced suffered in London. But it was wall-to-wall concerts. It was not unusual on a weekend to do Bruckner 8 with Bernard Haitink on Saturday afternoon at 3:00, and then to do the Magic Flute in the opera on Saturday night, and then get up at goodness knows what time and go in and play Schubert Mass in E flat in the Hofkapelle, in the Hofkapelle, in the Hofburg Palace, and then to do Bruckner 8 again on a Sunday morning at 11:00, and then at 5:00 to what's left of you, drag yourself over to the Vienna State Opera and play Götterdämmerung. That was not an unusual experience. Okay, it wasn't every weekend, but I would say I probably played 3 or 4 weekends like that a year. And the rest of the week was a similar pattern. You were playing an opera, pretty much every night. So after, a few weeks of being there and sight reading these operas in the evening and doing ballet rehearsals during the day and philharmonic rehearsals and practicing for solo recitals, I was 35 years old, but I was starting to get a bit tired, and you turn up to the opera to do a Sicilian Vespers, it's like, God, big deal, do I have to kind of thing. And you sit there slumping in your chair, and all of a sudden you realize this guy next to you, who's up for retirement, he ain't no spring chicken, sitting next to you with a viola, who's been doing the same workload as you, doesn't need the back of his chair. He's sitting up there and he's nailing it. He's saying, "Come on, let's do this," to all of the people around him. And at the back of the section, quite a lot of them were that age as well. And they were up for it and giving everything. And they'd probably been doing chamber music rehearsals in between the performances as well, in between the rehearsals. And this man next to me had a name. He still has a name. Hans-Peter Oxenhofer. And this was just an incredible thing for me to see the musical desire, the enthusiasm that drives the greatest musicians, or the people that are good at anything, really. Make no mistake, these people, you can call it back desks if you like in the violas and the second violins, but that should in no way diminish their ability as musicians and performers. These are seriously good and seriously serious musicians, let me tell you. They care and they work and they're brilliant. And that, for me, and listening to the musicality that was coming out of them, for goodness sake, it was incredible. It's something that takes me through the rest of my life as a musician. I learned so much from them. But the sort of innate musicality of things. And it was obviously something that you could pass on, because Hans-Peter was the professor at the Hochschule in Vienna, and I think now nearly all of the section studied with him. A very, very proficient and very influential teacher. And it occurs to me, I hear all around the world, we're not paid so well and the conditions are not great, and occasionally you see orchestras with string players who seem to have a turning circle of about 4 centimeters on the bow, and they're tired, and it's really not easy for them. And let me tell you, money has got nothing to do with it. If you love what you're doing, you love what you're doing. And for those of you who don't know, the money the Vienna Philharmonic or the Vienna State Opera earn is not great. Per call, per service in the Vienna State Opera, it is not great. The Vienna Philharmonic started as the hobby orchestra kind of the Vienna State Opera. Now, as it were, the tail is wagging the dog. The finances are much more in the Philharmonic than it is in the opera. But that makes no difference. Money has nothing to do with it. I remember, it's the passion. It's the passion. That's what it's about. It's about caring about what you do. I never deliberately do a bad concert. I'm not saying I don't. I'm saying I never deliberately do a bad concert. Doesn't matter where, when, or with whom. You give everything. When I lived in London, I lived close to where 2 English soccer teams used to play. Tottenham Hotspur and Arsenal. Oh, sorry, no, I beg your pardon. Let me correct that. Not where they used to play, where their second team used to play. Where, I'm talking about in the 90s. And they used to go and play. No one was interested. They didn't play the second team games in a stadium. They used to go up and play in a bloody field in Borehamwood, and it'd be a January, cold, rainy, wet, muddy, sludgy Wednesday, dark evening. And there'd be, Tottenham Hotspur against Reading Reserves or whatever. And there'd be like 5 guys taking their dogs for a walk. And me. No one was interested in those days. And they were up and coming. There were some of the young players. There were players they were trying out. And in some cases, they were the big timers who'd been out for injury and needed a run out. They needed to go and get on a competitive field for 30 minutes to see how they did with it. And one time I saw a player called Ian Wright playing for Arsenal, an Arsenal legend. And he played also for England. Great centre forward. Wonderful personality. Now he's a bit of a TV celebrity, but great guy. Obviously great guy, great personality. And standing in pitches like that, I'm not saying you could lean against the goalpost, but you could get pretty close. You could certainly stand directly behind the goalkeeper, sort of with your feet pretty much on the netting. No one minded in those days. And I saw him one time. They were giving him a run out to see if he was, back to fitness. And he was probably earning who knows what. Back then, the equivalent of £100,000 a week now. He was one of the top earners. And rightly so. He would have done anything to score It didn't matter it was raining in a muddy pitch in January. It's what he did. And the competitiveness and the joy with which he did it was just incredible. He was impossible to manage. He scored a couple of goals, and I think they pulled him off before he hurt himself, because the money wasn't important to him. It was what he did. And I saw that again with those viola players in the Vienna Philharmonic, and, to be honest, the second violins as well. That's just the caption of this podcast is just to get your attention, because you're thinking there's a lot of jokes coming up. But that was the next time I really saw that these guys did not care what the money was or what what the conditions were or how tired they were. They wanted to do the best job possible. It was quite funny. You know, there was sometimes when in Vienna, you know, a lot of the operas are not rehearsed, and you get a new conductor in, and they have to pick up the score. You know, the official score that says you do this in 4, this in 2, so everyone knows what's coming. And there were several times when conductors would have been completely bamboozled, that means lost, by a wayward tenor, let's say, on the stage, and they didn't know what was supposed to be happening. And then they'd look down and they'd realize that the back desks of the violas were still playing. They knew exactly what was going on. They'd been there 10,000 times before. So that's what I learned from the back desk of the viola section in the Vienna Philharmonic, in the Vienna State Opera. I'm incredibly grateful. And as promised, I'm going to finish this off with another story. It's not a viola joke. It's not a joke. This happened. And I've got to give the final word to Maurice Murphy, former legendary first trumpet of the London Symphony, who seemed to be able to say anything and get away with it. And we were playing something in a rehearsal, and the back desk of the violas were kind of like covering their ears and looking around and shaking their head. And he said, "Hey, don't look at us. You should have practiced more when you were at college. If you'd practiced more, you'd be sitting up the front now, and it's not as loud." So there you go. I hope you enjoyed that. If there are any issues that you found particularly interesting, don't forget to contact me, and always go to ianbousfield.com for lots more interesting stuff.